He kōna ipurangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
Kia ora, I'm Aaron Smale, and welcome to the Stolen Children of Aotearoa podcast. This story is about a gang whānau who spent their teens in the custody of the state. In this episode, we hear from April, who spent time in girls' homes across the South Island. This is her story from her point of view, a story she once told. It also rests on years of reporting that I've done into this issue and the 6-year Royal Commission of Inquiry into Abuse and Care. This podcast was made with the support of New Zealand On Air, Te Māngai Pāho and Whakaata Māori. It contains descriptions of the abuse of children, both physical and sexual, rape, racism, and strong language, so please take care. Part 2, April. I've been covering this issue for 8 years as a journalist, and one aspect that I've looked at is the connection between the abuse that children experienced in state welfare institutions and where they ended up as adults. Many ended up in gangs. Last episode we talked to Albert Epere from Black Power. He went through Lookout Point Boys Home in Dunedin before ending up in Kohitere, a welfare institution in Levin. His brothers Rob and Jason followed him on the same path, and then they all progressed to prison and joining the Black Power. But it wasn't only boys that went through these institutions.
My name's April Mokomoko. I'm 57. 7 children, 20 plus mokopuna. My dad is from Kaiapoi, my mum's from Moeraki. There's about 14 of us. My youngest brother and I are 4 siblings.
April Mokomoko is Albie's former partner, and she went through similar institutions to Albie that were set up for girls. But unlike Albie, April got a hint of what these institutions were like even before she was actually sent to one herself.
My dad drove the beer tankers in Christchurch, and I think after about 30 years of marriage, when I was 5, my mum and dad split up. I think it broke my mother, and she didn't like me, so my mum would leave me in other towns.
Sometimes April was left with her uncle, who worked at Campbell Park near Oamaru, a school for children with special needs. But Campbell Park also became a dumping ground for state wards. The vast majority were Māori.
We went to work with Uncle. They were all Māori. The Pākehā boys stood out like sore thumbs, and they said they were all backward. Whatever that is, it was a home for backward boys. But the whole place oozed of yuck. I can't explain it. You could see it in their faces. I saw some of them get disciplined. Well, that was pretty scary. And that's where I first saw horror about Māori people being locked up. The principal at the home, it was just the way that he treated, he'd go, don't come too close to me, your people smell. And that we were dirty and. And there was a fellow there called Mr. Drake. There was a big kind of open day sports thing. And it's a big old castle looking thing. We were away from the rest of the kids. And he did these things that I'd never seen. It was really horrific. And I just froze. And so did that kid. It was horrible. He was an old man. So I never wanted to go up there, and I couldn't say anything to Auntie and Uncle. I didn't even know what to say. And back then you just didn't bring it up. You might have got wasted, or you just run away. And Mr. Drake wasn't the only one. And I just didn't get how he was an old man.
In the interview, April doesn't say explicitly what she saw as a child, but the man she is talking about is called John Drake. John Drake worked in the state system for over 20 years, not only in Campbell Park, but also in Hawke's Beach School and Holdsworth, 2 other state welfare institutions in the North Island, where there were children. In my 8 years of reporting, his name has come up repeatedly, along with other perpetrators of abuse. John Drake was a prolific paedophile, and he was also sending kids from Holdsworth Boys Home in Whanganui to the Lake Alice Psychiatric Hospital, where an adolescent unit was set up in the early 1970s. The hospital was for criminally insane adults, and the children that were sent there were tortured with electric shocks and subjected to violence and rape by adult patients and staff. There were more than a dozen complaints to MSD by Drake's victims, and at least one victim made a complaint to the police, but police failed to properly investigate those allegations. John Drake died before he was ever charged. April's childhood impression of Drake was absolutely accurate. But Drake was just one among many abusers that worked in state welfare institutions and had access to children. After April's time with her auntie and uncle, she moved on to live with her nan in Dunedin.
Yeah, my nan, she raised 10 kids out at Moilaki. My nan moved to Dunedin. She got a job at Snow White Laundries. She had a hard life, but she'd sing her way through it and tell us things that as long as you know you love each other, keep tight, be kind, have manners, all that stuff. So by the time I got to Dunedin, I'd been to about 11 primary schools. They were pretty racist down here. And these people did something bad to my brother. So I smashed this kid up, boy. I took him in the boys' toilets and I didn't realise that I'd split him. And so I got in big trouble, so I didn't go to school.
How old were you at this stage?
11. I wasn't even a state ward.
Although she wasn't legally a ward of the state yet, April was sent to Elliott Street, a girls' home run by the Department of Social Welfare, because she was getting into trouble and the state didn't think her nan could look after her. It was here that she experienced what many young girls were subjected to when they first entered state welfare.
You had to have an internal, which is an examination with this thing that looks like a duck beak. And I just remember kicking and screaming and just in the end the beating, and I just laid still. You had to take your knickers off and show them your knickers. If you got your period, we had to show them every pad that was used. It was so fucking embarrassing. In the showers, the male staff were allowed to look at us by the showers. And in Elliott Street, I was an absconder.
What were you running away from?
Slippery fingers and beatings. I couldn't tell my nan, you know, that might hurt her.
Slippery fingers, as we heard from the brothers in the last episode, was slang for sexual assault.
Raymond was my friend. He was in Lookout Point and I was at 40 Elliott Street. My brothers were over there too. He didn't really talk much, but if Raymond ever saw anything untoward happening to any of the girls, he would deal to it.
April's talking about Albie's brother Raymond Epity, who was always looking out for his brothers when he was a kid. But he'd also look out for girls he knew. Were there other staff that you were aware of that were moving from home to home?
There was staff, Mr. and that was from other cousins that had also ended up in that home. Mr. fucking Drake. And he secreted all of these places. So for me, I believe it was a ring because those same faces kept popping up. There were horror stories that happened here. I hate this shithole. Horror stories. If I think back and someone was to do that to my child, my brother Drew, they were always allowed to run away home. And so the last sighting of him, he's walking down the pathway in mum's slippers, and there's like 6 big cars for one kid. And they stopped him. Couldn't do anything. Couldn't do nothing. And then we find out that, he's in Holdsworth.
Holdsworth was one of the places that John Drake worked. Just like the Epiri brothers were sent to Kohitere for harsher discipline, April was sent to a girls' version, a welfare institution in Christchurch called Kingsley.
In Kingsley, that secure unit was called Clinic. I'd spend weeks in there. Well, it wasn't very big. You just had your toilet, the bed, the mattress went away in the morning. Scrubbing shit with a toothbrush while you're getting told how low you are and you fucking whores, I can smell your stink box from here, shit like that. Once you got up into the house, there was a dorm. You might get pulled out of there, take to the office, round in the med room, or in the boiler room. You didn't know when anything was going to happen. You witness stuff that's happening to girls, but you can't do anything about it, and you want to survive. The same fellas and women, people think it's just mean. It's not fucking mean. And I had no idea. And I trusted this lady, and she bought one of those thingies. He didn't touch me, but all the shit ended up all over my face. Out of him. I didn't know why. I still don't know why. I remember getting out of the cells on one occasion at a secure unit, and I had to go into the midroom, and the slippery fingers happened. And so the next morning, I don't know why, but they let me in the kitchen. So someone, because that's the best work you can get, is go in the kitchen. And I got in the kitchen, and then I'm still spinning or angry or something over what, and one of the staff ladies said, da-da-da, and do it properly or you'll be back down in clinic, just like that. And so I booted the kitchen door open, grabbed a knife on my way out. She came after me. I said, come near me, you fat bitch. I'll fucking kill you. And she let me go. I knew when I got caught that I would pay the price.
I've heard many versions of this with many victims. Younger kids, 8, 9, 10, weren't big enough to fight back, so they'd run away. But once kids started to hit adolescence, they'd start to defy staff and fight back. This would often escalate the harshness of the abuse, or they'd be sent to a different institution. The staff would make negative comments in the kids' files, but they wouldn't record the abuse that was provoking the behaviour. The kids usually had no one who was supporting them or listening to them. While many of the girls were Māori, there were also Pākehā girls who were vulnerable. April tried to find ways to stop the abuse, but her reactions often made things worse.
There were times I felt real stink, but I couldn't do anything, for other little people, little white girls. And then you find out, because they talk. Mary's Islanders don't, and she's there because she's accused her father of blah, 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 and it's a lie. So you feel for those kids, but at the same time, you use them. And get this, get that, and that one won't touch you. I'm pretty sure staff knew what was happening. Maybe they just didn't know how to deal with it. One of my welfare officers, I said to him, I told him, you fucking do that to me and put me back, da-da-da, and da-da, I'm going to call you one of those slippery fingers because I'm not going back to that shit. And he shut it all down. And from that I learned, waste of time. And then I got more shit. Just getting spoken to in yucky ways, made to feel dirty, and because I'm one of the Maoris, so yeah, when I was that age, I hated being a Maori. Hated it.
April says her nan never stopped fighting to get her back from the state's custody.
When I got out of Kingsley, my nan was still alive, but I was still a state ward, so I had to go to a family home. On a Tuesday, instead of going to do what I was supposed to do, I'd go and meet my grandmother. When I came back from up north and I'd been away for months and got back down here, my nan tried to go for custody. She was in the court, and I remember my nan, because she'd always sit up straight and, you know, her handbag and ladylike. You know, and the judge goes, well, we've got no choice but to make you a ward of the state. You can't control her because you're too old. But when he dropped, fuck, that nearly killed me. While I was in the family home, my nan died. And I had to get permission. So I ran away.
This began a cycle of trying to stay out of the clutches of the state and trying to find a place to fit in, to belong. April gravitated to those she'd known in the welfare homes, who were already starting to hang out with and join gangs. They knew each other and they looked out for each other.
I was 18, well, nearly 18. And then I got pregnant. And so there was, you know, questions were being asked already about my unborn baby. And the fellow that, you know, he wasn't a very nice man anyway, but... So I ran until I was 20. When I got into adulthood, I wanted a white picket fence, you know, and the way that people say that what your family's supposed to be, because I had no fucking idea. Well, I thought that was an escape, but it wasn't. I didn't fit in there. I had 3 kids, and I'd been running around the country, trying to hide. I was running out of money, got to Christchurch and I stayed there. The MKs were around the corner. Just go to the pad and have a good time.
The MKs were mangukaha, or black power.
Nobody did anything untoward, and I knew some of the bros then. One of them helped me out heaps. That's how I ended up on Linwood Ave. And for me, I fitted in. I fitted in there. People just like me for who I am. Fucking off my chops or whatever. I'm not sure how to explain it. It might have been where the bros were at the time, but it was, you know, I guess there was violence still happening back then, but there were things of change wanting to come. There was a connectedness. Those relationships brought me to loving being Māori.
April's pathway has a lot in common with others who went through the state welfare system. Most kids that went into welfare institutions became cut off from their whānau and then were kicked out of the welfare institutions when they were 16, if they hadn't already run away. The lack of education in the welfare institutions means they've often struggled to find work, and tertiary study or training was usually out of reach. The trauma and violence they'd experienced meant they found it difficult to trust. They had no support other than the relationships they'd formed with the other kids they'd gone through the system with. It was those kids they relied on for survival as they became adults. For many, those relationships were the basis of them joining or affiliating with gangs. They often struggled with addiction because of trauma and turned to crime to survive, which then drew the attention of the police and led into the criminal justice system. If they ended up in prison, they saw the same faces they'd seen in the state institutions as children. What they'd learned in those institutions was perfect preparation for the next state institution, jail. But all the way through, April has been trying to pull her kids and family away from the clutches of the state.
So, you know, the way that this has affected me is like I take these other drugs from the doctor. Yeah, because told me I've got severe post-traumatic stress and other types of things, and so I think I'll just push to get better and remain open. It doesn't work all the time. I feel less than. I've still got to get there. Still aspiring to be a great mama. Still aspiring to be a great sister. And I know today I've got to work that shit out on my own. I'm not a kid anymore. But does it affect me? Hell yeah. Hell yeah. There's times in that my thinking becomes that distorted. I can't get out of bed. There's times I don't want to be here. I believe hope is the mother of solution. Right? So I have hope all the time. If I don't, I want to be a control freak. My kids, with their little brushes with sips and getting in trouble, and there should have been a normal thing. And then policemen doing it to my kids, beat my kids up. Seeing my sons home in undies. They have to walk home in their undies. Are you kidding me? It's terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. I don't know what's going to happen. But all my kids are adults now, and I still worry. I've got mokopuna, the oldest one's nearly 19. My only dream that I ever had for my children is that they know that they're loved and they belong, that they're really important.
For both Albie and April, and others like them, it has been a struggle to parent and keep the authorities out of their adult lives. Many of those who have been on the same path want something different for their children and mokopuna, but how do they achieve it? And while the state is constantly punishing them, who is ever held accountable for the crimes that were committed against them? April's story, and many like it, have gone unheard and disbelieved for a long time. In the next episode, we hear about how April and Albie spoke out as part of the call for a Royal Commission of Inquiry. Many thanks to April, Albie, Rob and Jason for sharing their stories. This podcast accompanies a feature-length documentary, also called The Stolen Children of Aotearoa, which is available on Whakaata Māori at maoriplus.co.nz. I hosted and researched this podcast, and the script was written by myself and Ruth Corver. This podcast was edited by Bridget Lyon, with audio engineering by Phil Burton. It was produced by Ruth Corver for Awa Films, and executive produced by Julian and Bex Arahanga. I'd like to thank the RNZ team of William Ray, Tim Watkin, Tim Burnell, and Yana Tanahu Owen, and acknowledge the originating commissioner, Kay Elmers. This podcast was made with the support of New Zealand On Air, Te Māngai Paho and Whakaata Māori.